It is 9:30 a.m. on November 14th. And Hafn Colin Peace Squamish Owaomeo. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There's an agenda. This is our first budget committee home meeting. There's an agenda in front of the committee, so looking for a motion to adopt the agenda, moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Race. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. First up, we have staff reports and our budget survey on track review with Christina.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Maybe I should do a whole one at radio talk show kind of format. No?
Go for it. I'm Christina Moore, Communications Manager, and today we're going to get Council's feedback on the budget survey that is looking at a bit of a temperature check on how we're doing. So just to start out, I just wanted to remind Council of what the discussions have been to date on public engagement, so we can look at this budget survey in the context of the broader public engagement plan. The idea came up to do a survey that looked at a temperature check on how we're doing to assess, to get some feedback from the community on broad strokes, broad topic areas, not specific budget expenditures proposed for 2018. Following this survey, the idea would be, as we always do, the 2018 budget information will be readily available. The utility documents are online as we speak for today's workshop. And those documents will be shared as Council receives them in advance with the agenda packages as they're distributed. They will be available online as well as the public boards that we did last year at Brennan Park, at the library, here at Municipal Hall. So once the budget numbers are completely shared with Council, we will have those boards up as well. Another strategy that we looked at was to really highlight some of those high-level budget themes, such as infrastructure renewal, and try to capture some of the broader themes of the budget through the summary sheets online, through feature stories, and through those public boards. And then we have talked about the possibility of doing a participatory budget tool, which is to be determined depending on how the budget talks go and where that budget item may come from. So the Squamish Are We on Track survey, the discussions over the last couple of months have been around how this survey could give us a sense of where the community sits on a range of different topics. The idea that if the questions are broad enough and high level enough, this is the kind of survey that could roll out annually to give us a level of benchmarking as we proceed. The survey takes us through a list of high-level agree and disagree sliding scale questions, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And the community has an opportunity to either simply move the slider, and then if there are further comments that they would like to offer, they can do so in each of the categories. The feedback we received at the October Finance and Audit Committee on a draft list of questions from Council was really helpful in developing this draft. What we heard at that meeting primarily was these questions without the context of what we're doing could be really challenging for the community to understand or to answer them with sort of any real knowledge. So this version that you are seeing now is a hybrid version of a survey, but with infographic information that will provide a bit of a snapshot. It's certainly not a complete snapshot because our budgets are so extensive, but a bit of a snapshot of what is covered in that particular area and what the community can kind of gain some context around before they answer the broad question. The intention would be for the survey to run mid-November for approximately 4 to 6 weeks. We can keep it open right up until Christmas. Once you receive those budget binders, or the bulk of the budget binders in early December, will then launch the 2018 numbers online. So that would be separate from this 2017 review. So we'll jump into the survey, and we're really just looking for council's feedback on the survey questions, the concept, the clarity, everything that, any comments you have. Now, I have distributed a list of just the questions to help perhaps keep things focused. And I'll just give me one moment here while I pull this.
You want some feedback, or is that what we're doing?
Let's go. Yeah, I've got my pen ready.
So with regard to parks, recs, and trails, there's no other questions related to more arts-oriented programming for citizens. We want to add something in that line, and maybe it's parks, recs, arts and trails or something. Just because we ignore it far too often, and it is, I think, as important as recreation in a lot of ways, to be able to provide that type of programming for our citizens. So we'd like to get their feedback on whether they agree with me or not, I guess, and what that might look like. And I'm looking for council, does anyone on council disagree with that?
Do you have a sense, Mayor, do you have a sense of an example of a question you might like to ask?
Do we have, maybe a second question under there, do we provide enough arts programming? If not, what would you like to see? Well, let's see if you want to comment on that one.
I just wonder about facilities for arts, because it's going under recreation, parks, trails, and arts just seems awkward. Is it possible to add another, like geographic access to, we don't really offer anything. So
Well, hopefully people will then say, well, we
Yes.
need facilities for this type of programming and this type of activity.
yeah, I wonder if there's ways to sort of make the question differentiate between facilities and programming.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Ted and Karen.
Are we going to have a referendum question this election?
We discussed that last week, and I think the intention was to have a minimum survey type questions, if not possibly a referendum question.
The facilities might be on that.
Yeah. Karen?
I think it should read arts and culture.
Sure.
I think if we ask a question about facilities, I don't think we have any
Yeah,
for arts.
sure.
So I wonder if the question is about sufficient attention, or is arts and culture receiving the profile it needs, or programming, I don't know, the attention.
I think the question wants to be open-ended enough that it allows people to, but tight enough that it's not, that we can actually get some results out of it. Does that make sense? So maybe we'll just let Christina maybe think about the wording on that. Because there is a good question, we don't have facilities, but if survey comes back and people go, yeah, we really need an arts facility, then maybe we start prioritizing differently within the five-year plan. That's what it's intended to inform.
Yeah, although I'm not sure it's our responsibility to build those facilities necessarily.
Maybe not.
So,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the idea of putting it in there. I would actually have it as a separate bullet. It doesn't quite sort of, I know we lump it together in one department, but recreation, parks and trails are kind of a different thing from arts and culture. So I would put it in a separate bullet, and maybe it's a matter of, do we have enough opportunities for them, which is kind of programming, facilities, space, etc. I mean, it's kind of a broader thing. But just on this generally, I kind of like this actually. I like the idea of kind of making a statement to them and prompting the disagreement, the point where they have to respond on a point. So I kind of like the format. I thought that's kind of neat, kind of draws people into it. So I don't have any other comments apart from that.
And I'm not married to whether or not it goes in parks, recreation, trails, or, I remember when I first moved here, the rec center wasn't called the rec center, it was called the leisure center, because the idea was that it was connotating much more than just sport. It had a connotation that this is where you do leisure activities, whether it's playing dominoes or painting, or, at least that in my mind was that, and then we changed it to rec center, I don't know, about 15, 20 years ago or something like that. But, so I'm not married to it goes in this, I'm happy if it's broken out. I think council is mine, yeah.
Just a point on that, we actually have our budgets categorized based on British Columbia-wide financial segments, and they generally put arts and culture in with recreation. So that's why all of our records and all of our financial information funnels down to these particular pots that Christina's using, just because it streamlines well with our budgeting information.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Wait, I think you guys can go over it. Okay. Any other, yeah, Susan?
Thanks, economic and community development. The pace of growth connotates housing and employment. So I would like a question in there to ask about whether they work in the community or outside the community. I would like a sense of how many people are commuting outside the community for work.
I guess the
I work
challenge,
within my community and
the challenge is, this is a budget discussion. So I'm just sort of thinking out loud now, so we want to make sure we're getting information that helps us budget, whether increase service or decrease. Exactly, so I just wanted to frame it in that way. Tina?
The information, through you, Mayor, the information that Councillor Chappelle is looking for will be available through census data that will be obviously a much more informed and accurate picture versus what we can achieve through this.
When
just
we
as
get
a
the census
consideration.
data, we
I don't
can tease
remember
that
that.
out.
It
Question on the
releases
census.
through, it releases at different times, but we do have the data from the 2011 census. I
Yeah.
don't believe it's been released
That's
yet
right,
for
I looked at it.
2016, but we do expect that it will be available, just as a consideration.
I don't remember a question on the census this time about commuting to work.
You might not have a long form.
I didn't get the long form.
Where do you work?
Just, do you commute to work? Do you work within your community? Are the work opportunities in the community available to you that you would expect? Are the employment opportunities available? Maybe they'll come up with good ideas of what we can do better.
Well, I wasn't going to comment on that, but you could always just put that in the demographic information that's collected at the end. We ask about gender and age, and you can say, number of people commuting in my household are, rather than making a separate question, it's just a tick box. But then I was curious about the economic and community development question because I wasn't quite sure how it was going to help us budget. Because whether people are comfortable with the pace of growth or not, I'm not sure how that helps us make a decision about where we put our economic development dollars in this coming year. Because I think we'll get lots of opinion, but it doesn't help me decide if I want to invest more in economic development or which area of economic development. So that question was a bit vague to me.
And it does sort of focus more in on housing than on job growth.
Through you, Mayor, so that was a topic of discussion amongst our staff, and we had similar feedback and differing opinions, so I appreciate your concerns. The budget area is economic and community development, so it does cover the planning and land use development, environmental planning, as well as economic development. So we're looking at it as a holistic area on the one side. We did struggle with some of these questions, how to phrase them, how to pull out the information that we're looking for. Asking around the pace of growth, the idea was, again, sort of this benchmarking piece, but to get a sense of really within the feedback, to get a sense of what the concerns may be, where the hot buttons are in the community. I agree, it does draw your immediate thought to housing, and that's likely a lot of the feedback that we would get in terms of the development, or in terms of the concerns and development.
Thank you very much, Lynn. One of the reasons we targeted the question somewhat in this manner is there have been discussions in the past with both council and the management team about how quickly do we facilitate the pace of growth as well. So when we're looking at budgeting, do we need to add more people in the planning department because we want it to go at this rapid pace? Or is it okay to continue with this existing service levels and staffing and say, no, you'll wait, your queue will be longer, it'll take a little bit longer, and we're trying to gauge that off the community feeling around how fast is development happening.
Okay.
Yeah, I see that question as a good one. I mean, that's what I read into that one. The first thing that I see is maybe the order of the questions might not be I would start off with the government questions and then work through instead of starting off with the conversation. That was my first observation.
Any reason why it's in this order, or? Yeah.
Well, I think that we've tried to order the questions to be with the more compelling ones early on to get people's attention. I don't know, transit, transportation, getting around is a topic of interest, and that we felt that it would help draw people into the survey. There is the risk, it is a long survey, so there is the risk of losing people as they go through. So we ordered, that's why we put the general government at the end, because it seemed to be a little bit more of a capture-all, a little bit more administrative
Yeah, I would agree
than
with you on that. I follow
than the other topic areas.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, that was my way of thinking, but I read every one of these questions, I can hear someone complain to me about, and someone goes, oh, I go, oh, that guy was complaining about it. Oh, do you think the roads are kept up? Oh, I know 4 people that are going to say no to that.
I actually find people say positive things too. We tend to remember the negative things, and people tend to not to say, but I've had people stop me in the grocery store saying, boy, we are doing such a good job on sidewalks and bike lanes. I can get around, my kids can get around. So it's just a matter of perspective and who you're talking to, but yeah.
One of the other thoughts we had, if I can just jump back to the pace of growth question, we do know that there are many residents who are quite happy about the new services and new businesses that have sprouted because of the population growth. And so that question was designed to try to gauge and hopefully receive a little bit more positive, response as well, to demonstrate, there are a lot of people who are quite excited that there's a lot going on here.
So is there a way to tease out that information more? Because we do want to hear feedback on all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, and I'm just sort of spitballing here, is it worthwhile saying, putting something in there that teases out comments on, yeah, the growth rate is great because we have more restaurants in town, or whatever it is. And I don't want to, I don't want to be manipulative in it, but I do want to make sure we're getting the range of feedback that we're looking for. So I don't know if you can just keep that as a thought.
Sure. I do like the format. I like the throwing down the question and asking for the counterpoint for that. Though they're not really budget related, 15 and 16, I think will give us some interesting comments at the end, or the feedback on the facing issues and the additional feedback. One thing I might add, it's neither here nor there, but on protective services, some people don't realize 100% that fire is also a protective service. They think protective services, quote unquote, is more police than it is fire, but I think it might be worthwhile to put fire/police or something in there, because not everybody understands that protective services also means fire.
It means bylaw, it means, maybe we could do a bracket.
Yeah.
Fire, police, bylaw.
Just so they understand the spectrum of that.
Sure.
Emergency
Yeah,
planning.
we can highlight that.
Karen, no, yes.
I'm wondering if for that question 6, you could say, I'm comfortable with the pace of growth of business and people. Yeah, population of Squamish in the community, just so that people remember that we're talking about both. And
Yeah,
not
that's
just housing
the
starts.
wording I was trying to.
So we could just
What
put a
she said.
qualifier in there?
I think, some of the other things we might want to know, keeping in mind this isn't a long-form census, but a budget tool, maybe comes into the demographic, at the end of the survey. Rather than clutter up the survey and make it a longer survey, just who are you, age, sex, etc., resident, live, work here, etc. So I think own a business, that kind of thing. There's probably several little bits of information you can tease out just in that box without kind of expanding the survey. Because I think if I remember the comments from the last time we looked at this, one of the things we wanted to do was to simplify it and shorten it a little bit so we didn't kind of lose people in the middle of the survey.
Awesome. Any more feedback? No? Great, thank you. Thank you.
May I just ask a point of clarification? So with the changes and the feedback we've received, are we prepared to issue this without coming back to council one more time?
I think so.
Great, and before this, later this week.
And that launches soon?
By the end of the week?
Excellent. Will you get that URL in my phone?
Thank you, Councillor.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Anushka, Reverend Financial Analyst, and sounds like the mayor looks very excited about the upcoming workshop. Yeah, so today we're going to review the capital and operating budget for the 3 utility funds. And I'm just gonna quickly highlight where we're at or where we're going after this. Hopefully, December 5th, we're planning to have the UT bylaw reading, so we can adopt the bylaw on December 19th. And we'll come back for more workshop in early December, on December 11 and 12, to review the general fund capital and operating budget. And we have another workshop scheduled on the 19th if we need it, in case we didn't have enough time to review everything on the 11th or 12th, or just to come back and review changes. We also have another meeting planned early January, after the Christmas break, to review all the changes made to the budget. In February, at end of January, there's going to be a public meeting, and then in February, mid-February, to review the financial plan, and then hopefully adopt by the end of February or mid-March. And I might be very positive here. Let's quickly review the process. I think you're all familiar with it. Today, really, we're just reviewing the financial plan to make sure that we have understood the priorities of council and the scope of the strategic plan, and that we're meeting the financial goals for the district. And hopefully, we've understood everything, so we won't have to realign the budget, especially for utilities so far. And we hope as well to give you a good idea on like the reserve level for the 3 utility funds. So we'll start by reviewing the capital plan, and then maybe we'll go for a little break, and then we'll review the operating budget for the 3 funds. And hopefully by the end of today, by lunchtime, we can get council direction on the utility fees bylaw that will come back to you on December 5th and present on December 5th. So let's start with your binder. That's the fun start. Let's go in your binder at page 4.1. I'm jumping like right into it, like you're all good with it.
They have this TV show on CTV called The Mayor, and it's like a fluffy, silly sitcom, but they came out, and they walk out with a big party, I guess with the budget. Sorry,
Kelsey almost went through the ceiling.
And sadly, you could relate.
This is the way.
I can try to be more dramatic in December. I'll work my game up. Maybe I should come with like high heels and my hair done too.
I hope so,
Yeah.
now we're gonna expect it.
I'm sorry. So like the key driver, the top 5 capital project for this year is the landfill vertical expansion. That's still a work in progress from this year. The water meters installation, just rehab and replacement for all the water system. And so that's the Buckley lift station reconstruction and the wastewater treatment plant. And as well, there's the Squamish Oceanfront project that will kick off in 2018. As well, there's always annual maintenance that are happening on the water and sewer assets. But let's look at it into more detail.
Hold on 2 seconds, Councillor Riss.
Thank you. Just on that point,
Yep.
number 7, the water meter installations, it says the total cost is 1.7 million, and the 2018 budget is 1.1 million. And so that's about a $600,000 difference, but it doesn't show that we're spending any more money in the next 4 years after that.
So that $600 means was spent in
Last year,
2017.
we spent it in 2017.
Oh,
Because that's a project that can
Yeah,
okay.
happening at the
this
moment.
is the second.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I see. CFWD, carry forward.
Yep.
Missed that.
So, does it?
Yeah, hold on 2 seconds. Peter?
I just had a quick question. I'm just going down the list here. I'm kind of jumping ahead of you.
Yeah, I know.
Quite sure.
You're excited about this. I can
Too
see.
excited. I'm just looking at fall arrest upgrades in here. Is that the best fall arrest?
Is that in the water utility?
It's under
Yeah.
sewer utility.
Sewer.
Line 16.
Okay,
It's 10,000 across 3 years.
that would be for sewage lift stations putting, it's called a davit crane, so that people would, connect into
Yeah.
a vest and be able to be lowered and quickly removed if
So it's for the
necessary.
crane itself, not for the testing.
It would be for installing, like a crane at, or the ability to put a portable crane at each lift station.
Gotcha. Thanks. Okay.
All right.
So we're finally on track here.
Yeah. Elaine is back.
Well, okay, well, we can like go in detail and skip like the general stuff if you wish. But I just wanted to highlight that, like, between 2017 and 2018, the capital plan expenditure between the three funds, they're pretty stable between the three funds, year over year. With the Squamish Waterfront project ramping up, we can notice that the DCC contribution have increased quite a lot from 2017. And that's like from the Squamish Waterfront and like getting some like sewer and water facility like for expansion. As well, there's $1.2 million in projects that are carried forward from 2017. And we can like review these in details, and those projects are project number 6, so that's like the water distribution system flow meters. And there's number 4, the annual PRV replacement, so those are like the pressure valves. Number 20, that's the sewer lift station reconstruction, the Buckley lift station, that's $900,000, and 22, that's the wastewater treatment plant SCADA upgrade, and number 25, the Chief and Tantalus Road sewer upgrade. I'm just going quickly over the carry forwards because those are projects that were already approved last year. Let's review in more details like new projects. So those are all the projects that are affecting the fees. So that's a contribution from the utility fees. For the water fund, we have 2 main projects. And as well, like on page 4.1, you have like the high level schedule, and document 4.2 is all the details of all the projects. And in theory, I think the reference number on the left should match the numbers on the detailed list. If they don't, like,
I love the confidence. Your theory.
That was my goal. I might have just a few.
Everything is tiring work.
So for the water fund, there's 2 main projects that are gonna start in 2017, and that's project number 5 and 7 on the list. So, well, those are the annual water main replacement and the water meter installation. What's happening with the water meter installation? There's already approved borrowing of $500,000, and they're requesting an extra $250,000 for this year to complete the project. And then...
And that's from borrowing.
I'm sorry?
And that extra 250 is from borrowing?
That's from fees.
From fees.
Yeah, the utilities fees. The new project for the water fund are number 10, 11, and 12. So these 3 projects will either affect fees or DCC. There's one that's DCC, and that's like the new reservoir. So that's number 12. And the 2 projects affecting utility fees are the Powerhouse Springs Well 3 replacement, and this one, number 10, and the new Blind Channel PRV.
It's a general question.
Yeah.
What is the decision between, for example, borrowing or going to fees to revenue? Is there, some things are better in one place than the other? Is there a particular formula for that?
I can respond to that, thank you. Generally, what we've been trying to do over the last few years is limit some of the borrowing to the utilities and get them essentially almost self-funding. We will look at projects that are large though, particularly, and we have had some trouble getting to a full no borrowing scenario on the water. So over the last few years, we've been trying to wean up. One of the major drivers in water has always been the annual water main replacement. Based on our financial policies, we would like to get that away from a borrowing scenario, because it's a year-over-year habitual requirement. We haven't quite managed that. We're still funding that about 500,000 from borrowing right now. Any new or growth type projects or new facilities, we try to go to borrowing, and anything over 300,000, we generally start looking at whether we need to borrow. Hopefully that's helpful.
And that's outlined in our long-term financial plan prescriptions.
So our financial policies essentially say that rehab and rehabilitation, as much as possible, you'd like to build the reserves and funding that way. Borrowing, we would look to new infrastructure.
Susan. Oh, sorry, follow up, Doug.
Well, just number 14, the annual replacement, then, because it's an annual cost, even though it's $5 million, that will come out of fees. That's because it's the annual repeating.
Generally, right now, the sewer replacement reserves are healthy, and so we are, as much as possible, trying to get all of those rehab and rehabilitation things onto the stream of reserve and fees funding. And right now, we're being quite successful with doing that.
I was just gonna ask about the success of that, and also, do we have an idea of where the anticipated work is going to be done this year? Are we concentrating that over, we just sort of follow the breaks, or how is it decided on? How is it, I know it's fully decided on.
Yeah, we have asset management plans, et cetera, that
Yeah.
prioritize this stuff, but David, do you want to speak to it more?
Sure. We have been working on a sewer master plan over the past couple of years, and so we've received a draft final report, and we're just in the process of reviewing that. We will bring that back to council and explain that in more detail, but basically we've done inspections, detailed inspections, identified deficiencies in our sewer system, looked at growth, kind of taken all that together and come up with a capital plan. So we have a master plan that will guide where we do the work, the rate that we do work, where attention should be.
That's fantastic, because it has been just listed like the way people do it previously, so I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you, David. And is it the same with the water replacement?
Yes, so the district completed a water master plan in 2015, and it has a detailed plan for where we would be doing water main replacements, upsizing based on growth and condition and
Can we get a
age.
list of that or a map
It's all available in the water master plan, which is available
for this
on-
year's renewals?
So
Or
we
is it
generally
broken
try
down?
and stick as closely as possible to what the water master plan says, but then we also consider where we repave the roads, and so we do massage it. We don't follow it to a T, but it is general guidance. So we would, every year at around this time of year, the capital projects manager would sit down with sustainability coordinator and look at, so where can we put projects together to make them most efficient, and then as part of that, we would determine where exactly we're going to be doing water main, sewer main, paving, all of that.
So
that
when we determine that, we can get a list back of, we're doing this stretch on, we're going to get those work orders anyways and those tender, but we can get a list of where those priorities, so we just have an understanding.
And if there's more money this year being asked for, I'd just like to understand how closely we're following the plan for the water sewer, and if it's being, the entire plan's online, but being broken down into completed, or is it done in our GIS system that's completed and still to be done, and how we communicate that to the public is really critical. So, thank you.
Okay.
Excellent, thanks.
So we've jumped forward a little bit, so we're already in the sewer utility capital plan. There's only one project that's a carry forward for sewer, and that's the lift station reconstruction, the Buckley lift station reconstruction. That's number 20. So for that project, 800,000 is carried forward, and there's a request for an extra 100,000 funding coming from utility fees. The four main project for sewers in 2018 are number 14. That's like the annual replacement and rehabilitation. Number 20 that we just talked about. Number 23, that's the wastewater treatment plant that's upsized for future growth. And on your schedule, you're going to notice that at the far right, you're missing the funding sources, which is about $760,000 funding from the DCC fees and $470,000 from revenues. And the last big project for sewers is the Chief View and Tantalus Road sewer upgrade. That's number 25 on your list for 1.5 million, and that's mostly from development charges. There's also project number 24, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade for bar screen, and I think you've already heard about that in previous council meeting. So that project is underway in 2017, and there's a request of increasing that budget for 2018 for completion of $200,000.
And what was last year's budget on that one?
The total budget here is 620, so probably like 400 and something grand.
And so we just didn't budget enough to complete the project, or was it always anticipated to do something this year?
It started this year, and I think they needed a little bit more money to complete the project in early
So we
2018.
under budgeted? I'm just trying to understand, did the scope grow, or did we not anticipate how much it was going to cost?
I think really it's more that we are starting leaning up. That project will bump a little bit into next year, in the new calendar year.
But why the cost increase? Is it the scope changed, or did we underestimate the cost of it? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I think that the scope did change. Unfortunately, it wasn't as simple as just replace bar screens. There was some structural work that was required to upgrade the channels inside the wastewater treatment plant. So it was a case of once getting into detailed engineering, the scope grew.
A lot of that had to do with trying to, we have to do the work while we're still operating. And so we had to build a third channel in order to be able to sequence all of the work and to go through extra time and money.
Yes.
So all of that explanation doesn't jive with what's listed here for 24, which says unspent amounts from 2017 will be carried forward, but there's no unspent amounts being carried forward on this.
According to last year's capital plan, they did intend to spend about $620,000, so there's only been a minor scope change.
So you drifted off there at the end.
I'm sorry, so I'm just getting my nod from engineering to make sure I'm not misspeaking. They obviously manage the projects, I don't. But we did actually budget $620,000 last year, so it does look like it's a carry forward of $200,000.
Okay. But it's asking for revenue for $200,000, not a carry forward. So the explanation and what is listed here is not aligning. So it's got $200,000 fund from revenue, but the explanation says there's carry forward.
Yeah, so that does seem out of whack for sure. So we'll have to take that back
Maybe
and make
just
sure
go
that
and
it
clear
hasn't
that.
also been a scope, or maybe we just didn't get the total cost increased properly in the column in G.
If we could get it, just a clarification on that.
Yeah.
Okay. We having fun yet? No, okay.
I've had enough of the cough syrup and Neocitran this morning. I'm all good. Don't worry.
We're in the club.
I need some of that.
Don't worry about me. New projects for 2018, so we'll make those corrections and we'll come back with.
And just clarification to make sure.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up
Yeah.
the form now to have a look and see.
Thanks.
And that's been like a moving piece in the past month. The new project for 2018 in the sewer fund are number 16, the fall arrest upgrade, 18, that's the SCADA hardware replacement, 19, that's the SCADA radio replacement, and 21, the storm sewer inventory collection. So yeah, so those are the new projects for the sewer. Yeah. Any questions? And yeah, we've talked about the landfill vertical extension for solid waste.
So just a general question with Karen. I know we've talked about this before. Our asset management plan is getting to be 6-7 years old and a little out of date. I know we're doing all these sort of master plans that sort of feed into the asset management plan. What's our schedule on updating the asset management plan?
We have requested a budget for next year to update the asset management plan, and we would bring in sort of these asset specific plans like the sewer master plan, water master plan, forthcoming wastewater treatment plant, and integrated stormwater. We'd bring all of those together into a comprehensive update next year, and we're currently seeking...
Next year being 2018?
2018, yes.
So it's in this year's budget?
Yes.
This year's proposal?
And we're seeking grant opportunities right now.
Okay, excellent.
Mayor Heinzman, on the bar screens, we have made an error. They should be coming from accumulated surplus based on that one.
I'll make that correction.
At least Jeff likes to hear that. Karen?
In the graphs, I know we have the column right at the end, fund from revenue, but it's fund from revenue for the whole 5-year plan. So it's difficult to see what we're going to fund from revenue just for 2018. And I don't know whether you can simplify that or add another column just for the community, because it looks like under the sewer utility, right, 5 million, but it's actually only 1 million for
Current year, yeah.
the current year. And it just might help people to see that we're actually not going to take 5 million from fees this year.
Yeah. What
That's
about
a good suggestion.
what about just presenting 2018 instead of presenting the whole 5 years? Which, like, my comment on the it's as well like resource in the organization, but if you look at the capital plan for the next 5 years, we can tell that 2017 and 2018 year over year we're at a pretty, like, we're at the same level, and if we jump forward to 2022, we're like spending 2.3 million on capital. So we could, I don't know if it
Yeah.
would be a good solution to only present 2018, so that way there wouldn't
Could
be.
we just add another column?
Yeah, we could as well.
Yeah, we have in the past added just the operating column for the first year
Yeah.
to the right of that,
Yeah.
and we'll take that back and make
Okay.
sure that when we come out with the general fund, we do that, because of course, when we're working with the general fund, it becomes very relevant.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
um,
no, great. Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks. I'm wondering about stormwater innovation, not just management. Like what we're doing to fund moving towards a better way to manage our stormwater. I know we do, like, I look at ways that we can use mapping of permeable surfaces. We don't really keep track of our permeable surfaces in our GIS mapping. And I'm wondering how we can more align other assets, like land management assets, with our stormwater.
Oh, and stormwater and drainage, our master plans are in this year's budget too, coming up? Yeah, 2018.
Yeah.
Actually, in 2017,
Okay.
and so we have just closed an RFP, and staff will be bringing back a recommendation to award the consulting services contract 1 week from today. And so that would initiate work for the integrated stormwater management plan, and we would look at that kind of issue. It's going to look at how do we manage stormwater from an asset management perspective, and then also innovative green sustainable technologies.
And then it has to get into the subdivision development control bylaw.
Exactly.
And a bunch
That's
of
exactly
other
my
pieces,
concern, is
but-
we're missing out on a lot of, that's my concern. Exactly. It's like that as we develop, which we're doing rapidly, is we're not really managing our growth appropriately with stormwater management, because we're using up permeable surfaces and quickly,
There's a few properties in Brackenfell that literally paved their whole front yard.
which is totally fine in our bylaws.
Gary, I saw your hand jump up there. Did you want to add anything? or
Actually,
you covered it?
Mr. Ralston covered all this.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, Peter.
And so in that new stormwater master plan, it's going to speak to, because of the fact that we have so much wastewater going into the sewage treatment plant as well, especially on heavy rain occasions, that puts a tremendous load on that system. So we're looking at ways to cut down that infiltration and remove some of those points where it is actually connecting?
So that topic is specifically being referenced in the sewer master plan, which we're just wrapping up. The integrated stormwater management plan would not look at that. So infiltration, inflow into our sanitary sewer system is specifically addressed in the sewer master plan.
And looking at ways of reducing those connections?
And we do have an active program where we've cameraed and used smoke to find areas where we're seeing infiltration and leaders from gutters directly in the sewer, et cetera. And we have staff working with individuals today quite aggressively to reduce.
So with this rainfall, we'll get some good measurements with that.
Absolutely.
Because it gets hit pretty hard.
It's worth pointing out the storm is not part of the sewer utility. So certainly when it comes to cross connections and reducing those, that's definitely in scope in the sewer utility. But the storm system in general is not part of it.
Ideal.
But they do speak to one another.
They do,
Yeah. Thanks.
unfortunately.
All right, I guess we're
Well, that's
enjoying
about-
questions and thoughts right from the beginning.
Yeah, do you need any more information on anything? Because I think we've pretty much reviewed everything.
Any other questions? I must say, it feels very good that we're getting these master plans done. So that we have a real comprehensive approach to our 5-year capital plan. This was the topic of my column this week, Chief, so glad to see that we're on the same lines. But I think it's really critical because then we can actually be very targeted. We have to be nimble enough if something emerges that we're not anticipating, but having these master plans that really inform this process is really helpful. And the other piece, I think, I just want to make sure we're mindful of how, when projects carry forward, goes back to that issue before of it, is it coming from this year's revenue or is it scope creep? Right? I think it's really important that we're introspective when we have those situations where, because we can learn from them, where we have a project and we get in there and we realize, oh, there's X, Y, Z that we didn't contemplate as we put together the budget for this. So I just want council to have that information back to say we went through this introspective process. So next time we can make sure we're sort of getting the scope a little more clear up front and not halfway through. And I know there's always situations, but.
Yeah, that's a good comment. It's something that our capital projects manager tears his hair out over. It's a lot of times these large capital projects are identified in a master plan, which is really looking at things at a 10,000 foot level, and then when we get into the detailed engineering stage, that's when you start to uncover some of these challenges, like, oh, we have to cross under a railway, or there's high groundwater in this area, and so those things we start to uncover, and then costs do start to go up. So it's not necessarily a matter of managing the project poorly, as opposed to just the more you know, often the more you realize how challenging certain projects are.
And it's certainly something that we've been debating. Do we take a step back and make sure we do a full detailed engineering 1 year and then come back with a really detailed? We have certain areas that we just need to be very aggressive on, and we don't feel like we want to lose that year, and so we feel that we're better off being really aggressive and we design build in the same year, and then we sometimes get caught in the situation.
Thanks, Chris, that's helpful. Karen?
One of our biggest capital projects is the landfill expansion, and I'm just wondering if that project's on track. And also the notes make mention of potentially having a project engineer required to manage that project, and I'm wondering, is that captured in the operating
Is that in the budget?
service? Is that in the
We're going to
budget?
let engineering speak to that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the vertical expansion project is on target, and it is crossing over through the winter and into next year. So how that all goes will be a bit dependent on the weather. We are at risk of some shutdowns. The project manager for that position is being capitalized. So, and that was in the original reports to council and in the original budget. It was such a large project we knew we needed to have eyes on the ground up there more than we normally do.
Thanks, Sue.
I'm wondering about your comment about being able to see it from 10,000 feet. Basically, it's felt to me like we've done these master plans, but we're always catching up and observing what we have instead of really and we make plans to renew our infrastructure based on its failure rate, but don't really budget for sustainable practices in the future. And technology, in response to the mayor saying about being nimble, I just wonder how we budget for innovation. Like, how do we plan, do we add money for budgets as technology changes, which is rapidly changing our ability to manage our stormwater, water, and sewer systems really quickly? But our master plans are from 2015, and technology has immensely changed since then. So how do we see in our budgets the ability to be nimble with technology changes and updates? And when we take things apart, do we assess for new technology changes that can address problems faster and be more sustainable in its practices?
Yeah.
So I have a couple of comments on that. One is that it's an official community plan policy that we update our master plans every 5 years. So if we don't end up in a situation where we have a master plan that's too old. So we are responding to new technology and continually updating those plans to make sure that they're relevant. And the other thing is that we do actually quite a comprehensive job with those master plans. So it doesn't just look at replacing infrastructure. For instance, our water master plan looks at water meter installations and can we be reducing demand through that innovative technology. Sewer master plan is looking at how do we reduce inflow and infiltration. The integrated storm water management plan is going to do a comprehensive policy review and looking at sustainable technologies. All of those costs are brought into the master plans, and so that ensures that we are budgeting not just to replace infrastructure, but also to be doing these innovative practices as well.
So for instance, water meters, if we look at 5 years ago, what water meters could do was measure water in and out. There, as technology changes, is it possible that water meters could actually do, like pressure readings or like other things that things can measure? I guess my question is we look at doing sustainable practices like reducing water, but can technology cross over into different budgets and look at different ways that we can measure, mineralization of the water, like anything else that can be measured, or do we actually know enough to actually make replacements and make decisions on technology that's available today as opposed to relying on a master plan where technology may have changed?
So I guess the question is, how do we have a master plan, it's 5 year, we try to keep update that is relevant to particularly disruptive technologies that are moving very quickly?
I guess I would answer that. I don't believe that technology is changing so quickly in the wastewater and water world that 5 years is necessarily out of line as far as an overall look. But then when we go and we do an individual project through the master plan, we're then also doing a detailed design, almost always through consulting engineers who are up to date on the technology and the state of the art, and that's part of our RFP process, is looking at their competence. So I think we would catch any sort of sudden disruption through that process.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Doug?
Thank you. And I'm not sure if this question is relevant now or whether it's in the operating budget, but I was just curious if we could find or have some discussion about where we are generally with these plans. And for example, or these utilities rather, for a significant amount of work, if you look at them all combined, there's actually very little borrowing, and there's even less funded by reserves. And so I was just tried to get a sort of a bigger picture, if you like, of where the financial position of these three utilities actually is. Do we have sufficient reserves? Do we not? What are our borrowing requirements? Should we be borrowing more or less? Just kind of a general statement or general discussion around that.
Yeah, we will review like all the reserves during the operating,
Yeah,
the
that's what I was
review of
wondering,
the
is here.
operating budget. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So we'll have that discussion in a minute?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
well, I can wait.
I mean, very quickly, my understanding, and Christine, maybe you can elaborate, as you just said, the sewer fund is doing well. It's healthy, the water fund's pretty good. The landfill one, or the solid waste one, it's fairly new still, and we're still building up reserves in that one. Maybe just very quickly, just so we have a bit of a
Sure.
context.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Heinzman. The sewer reserve right now is healthy. The water reserve we're watching it carefully, and that's one of the reasons that we're doing some borrowing even against our rehab projects. And our solid waste project will be building up reserves over the next 5 years, but currently has limited to almost none, as you can see by the schedule that's put up top there. So with solid waste though, the major landfill, we are borrowing for that. It's a major infrastructure improvement or growth expansion. So we are borrowing that right now. So we're not seeing that reserve as being a huge risk, being low at this point.
We have to remember the solid waste reserve is only 4 or 5 years old now.
It is, it used to be part of the general fund.
It used to just, yeah, exactly, so
Mhm.
just so people understand that. It's
There-
just taken that time to.
I did mention to council that I was concerned about the solid waste fund and thought that that would be a major issue. However, in reviewing the solid waste, which I think we'll be doing next,
Yeah.
I don't want to steal the thunder, but essentially solid waste found some additional reduction in expenditures. We'll talk about the good and the bad of that, but that significantly covered off some of the debt expenses that were going to be coming down the pipe. So it's in a little more comfortable position than I thought it was going to be.
Thanks. Ted?
And how many more years do we have with that landfill?
With the expansion.
No, with the landfill. I mean, it's gonna fill up. I thought we only had 5 or 6 years left on it.
With the expansion.
Through the mayor, we would, obviously, very little without the vertical expansion. With the vertical expansion, 5 to 12 years, depending on how well we do with zero waste. We're estimating close to 10. And you'll see in the request for special projects, you'll see a request to do a pre-design on a horizontal expansion to ensure that we have the land near the existing landfill to do a horizontal expansion.
And the existing, if we didn't do the vertical, it's like not even a year. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we move on? Everyone okay? No one needs break?
Okay, so we're all good, so.
Move to that.
Any questions from the extensive audience out there? No.
Budget's always popular. So in your binder, and we're not going to review those in detail, page 5, 1, 2, and 3. So you've got the financial statement for each fund. We'll just jump right into looking into like the changes from 2017 to 2018, which are on page 5.5, if everybody's okay with that. Yeah. So the main changes from 2017, let's start with labor. And you have those detailed on page 5.5 of your binder. In labor, it's allocation from engineering. It's an increase of, it's about 17 or 18 grand. And there's also an increase in labor, and it's an allocation as well from public work, which is a transfer of the SCADA technician from the IT fund, so the general fund, to public work, and it's allocated to water and sewer. Christine spilled the beans a little bit in the contract changes. So in solid waste, we were able to reduce the expenses by 355 grand. And it's mostly due to the collection contract increase that was planned in 2017 that did not realize. So the solid waste, the engineering team, based on the 2017 number, were able to reduce that expense by over 350 grand.
Well, I think we need to have that explained a little bit, in terms of what happened there. Christine, who do you want? Go ahead.
Sure. So it was actually a landfill expense that we're talking about, and it was for the recycling of a lot of the materials, so the mattresses, tires, that kind of thing. We have an amount, and we were continually, for a number of years, overshooting our budget for that. So then we started to raise the budget to try to meet the amount. The more we encourage people to recycle, the more we have to cover these costs. And we actually managed to overshoot it enough that we were able to go back down again now. So it's just an adjustment based on our sort of prediction of how much is happening out there and what we need to pay for that.
Does that help, council? They're digesting.
No, so I can expand on that a little bit, about what this actually is. So some of the recyclables are cost neutral, some are not. We make the choice. For example, I think mattresses is an example where we actually, when we recycle mattresses, there's a net cost to us. We're trying to really encourage people to keep mattresses out of the landfill because they don't compress very well, kind of by design. So there are items like that, or for other environmental reasons, where we're actually taking it in. So if we do a great job in zero waste and have lots and lots of recycling, then that line item goes up in the expenses. And but we have to estimate each year how much people are going to recycle. And we overshot last year and had too much in the budget for the amount we saw, so we're bringing it down somewhat.
So, just so I understand this means we didn't achieve our zero waste goals? Or the opposite? I'm trying to understand.
It's a bad news story. We didn't recycle as much as we'd hoped.
Okay, that's what I thought. So that's what Christine was referring to.
But we're
The good and
saving
the bad.
money.
The good is that there's some money in there. The bad is that the community didn't divert as much as we had hoped they could.
Yes. I wouldn't say that we weren't necessarily achieving our goals, so.
Okay.
Yes.
We just anticipated that they would be better. Okay.
The nature of the exercise is very much forecasting in terms of tonnage coming into the landfill and how those streams will be diverted. So it is a bit of a guessing game. We bring in millions of dollars worth of, landfill, and it's difficult to predict sometimes.
Okay. No, I get it. Okay, continue.
Okay. The next saving in solid waste is that they've signed on with Recycle BC this year. So we no longer have to pay for the tipping fee for Carney's to broker all the recycling material. So that's a saving of $39,000. It's not on the screen, like you've got like all the details in your binder on page 5.5. There's also there's a cost increase in sewer for $53,000. The tipping fee at the Whistler facilities have been increased by $10 by meter cube or metric ton. Thank you. So that increases our fee by $53,000. And other changes, that's like Schedule 3 on page 5.5, and that's line other existing Schedule 3 there with $13,000. Excuse me. There's been a $27,000 increase in biodisposal cost just from the forecast and the community growth for next year and like this year. And there's also with the installation of the new screen at the wastewater treatment plant, we'll collect more biosolids. So then that's going to increase the landfill tipping fees by about $20,000. We're also planning that utilities costs, like just in general, like hydro, and are going to increase by about 5%. So it's about like a $20,000 hit to the utility fund. Next, we can the main service level changes. So that's page 5, 6 in your binders for 2018. It's the request for a part-time utility clerk that's going to take care of that's going to be shared, between the water and sewer fund, and that's going to administer the water meter and the cross connection program, and that's 0.18 FTE. There's also 2 electric arc flash assessment that are $4,000 each. And that's to catch up, and so we can become compliant with the Canadian electrical code, and that's like 4,000 by site. There's 2 in water, 1 in water, 1 in sewer, and there's going to be 2 as well in the general fund and for other facilities.
Okay, hold your thought right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, can we speak to technically what that entails, the arc flash?
I can speak to that. Briefly, this is an operations initiative, but essentially in the lift stations and pump stations, the electrical equipment. This is a safety evaluation of a setup to look at the risk of an electrical explosion, basically the arc.
That's kind of what I thought, but I just.
And those are bad.
Yeah.
Those are bad
Are very
and unsafe.
Really
Do
bad.
you have anything that's curious?
Thank you.
That was just more for general comment, thanks.
Yes. Thank you.
Next is the spring weekly organic collection. So that's to add like 4 weeks of collection in the spring, sorry. So 1 in April, 2 in May, and 1 in June. There's the waste audit. So it's about $22,000 every second year. So 2018 is the next year. There's also in community projects, there's a theater production, that's a saving of $6,000 this year. We have a theater production that goes to school every year, and it's been identified that it's just needed every second year. So it's going to come back into the 2019 budget. And there's the sewer utility odor control. There's been there's some public complaints, sorry, I was looking for the word. So that's really to mitigate that.
Where are the majority of our public complaints on the odor coming from these days? I haven't seen many recently. Gary?
As far as I'm aware, we have sort of at the wastewater treatment plant itself. This is particularly related to that Queensway lift station, which we do get complaints from. It's an odour issue, and the hydrogen sulfides create severe corrosion problems as well. So it's sort of dealing with 2 issues, one of which is nuisance.
So we're still having issues at the Queensway one?
Well, actually, it's one of those things. It's new technology that we found, so it's an innovation but it comes at a cost.
So still our main complaints are from the wastewater treatment plant itself and the Queensway lift station?
To the best of my
Yeah.
knowledge, yeah.
Thank you.
So that completes it for the service level changes.
Any questions from council on those service level changes? They seem fairly minor. There's nothing major. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Next are the special projects for 2018. So you can find that slide on page 5.8, and all the details are on page 5.9. So in the special projects for our carried forward from 2017 for a total value of $140,000. And those projects, you can see them, they're identified in the accumulated surplus column. So it's number 3, the water bylaw rewrite, number 5, the wastewater treatment plant condition assessment, and the building envelope inspection and repairs for the wastewater treatment plant as well. And the last one, number 9, the solid waste bylaw update, outreach and engagement. The new projects are number 1, the small tools for water, and number 2, the powerhouse spring power line easement clearing. So that's mainly contract services. Number 4, that's going to be those are major sewer tools, so replacement of existing tools. There's also been a discussion on having number 1 and number 4 into the special projects, because they could also be seen as operating expenses, but it's been decided to put them. I'm gonna get some water. Sorry.
Okay.
So it's been decided to put them into special projects because they're kind of once replacement, and we don't want them to get confused into like a service level change. Yeah, so it's just for this year. The number 7 is also a new project, so that's a landfill leachate treatment facility pre-design. So it's just it's a study to fix the current problem. And number 8, as Chris mentioned earlier, that's the horizontal landfill expansion pre-design. So it's just to accommodate the growth and complement the current vertical expansion of the landfill. Question? Yeah.
Okay, so 2 questions. One is just on that last one, the landfill expansion pre-design. Do you have a size you're contemplating, or is that one of the things that come out of the design study? You know, for example, 5 acre, 1 acre?
Through the mayor, we do. I don't know where it is off the top of my head. I can visualize it. It's a little bit larger than the existing landfill. It's the northeast, kind of more of an east-west.
We've seen a general map of it before.
Yeah, the only reason I asked that is when I first got on council, there was a plan to kind of make a large expansion, which is a kind of an 80-year project. And I think since then we've focused more on smaller parcels for a number of different issues. So this is another sort of the next smaller parcel, more or less.
I think the idea is to revisit that plan and make sure we have the land, and even though we would phase it, to make sure we have the land, because there will be, there's a portion, it's Crown land there, and there's a portion that we've sort of worked with Flynn Road to make sure they know we have interest in, but we need to validate that we have the right size for the ongoing, and start that process of licensing for that.
And the second question was a different point, but the allocation, just the rationale for the allocation between user fees and accumulated surplus, is there some way one would fit in the other and one and not the other?
Well, accumulated surplus are the project that have been approved in 2017, and Christine, please correct me if I'm wrong. So we're carrying forward those projects. They haven't been able to complete them in 2017, so we're...
Oh, I see.
So those tax dollars have already been approved, and we're saving them into accumulated surplus so we can complete those projects in 2018. And the projects are needed, the user fees are the new projects for 2018.
It's the CFWD again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doug already asked this question. Ken?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought we could expand the landfill. We spent years talking about how we're gonna have to take it up into the air because we can't expand it, and how many years is it gonna last? It's gonna last this many years, and then we're gonna start trucking. That's the first I've ever heard of solid waste landfill expansion. So I don't,
Horizontal expansion.
yeah, I mean, I I didn't know that, it might have changed my opinion on going up.
Through the mayor, somewhat before my time, so a year and a half to 2 years ago, that was when we were looking at the options on vertical versus horizontal, but that was talked about at the time. And because the horizontal expansion requires Crown land, it also requires Crown to consult with Squamish Nation. So when the Crown consulted with Squamish Nation, and we've been talking to them as well about what the options are, their response back was that they wouldn't support horizontal expansion or an expansion of our footprint at that time. They wanted us to explore vertical expansion first. So we feel like we've done that. We're well into the vertical expansion world, and now it's time to go back and have that conversation again, looking to the future, that we will need to expand horizontally and start that consultation process.
Get 20 acres. You know, don't ask for, oh, well, we might need this little bit. I am really surprised.
We're getting a little off topic. I have a different recollection, Councillor Pryor, and it's very much, horizontal was always an option. It was just going to take a lot longer to get there. We needed to find a solution in the near term, and that's why we did vertical. But the horizontal was always something that could in theory happen in the future. It was just the expediency of not having to acquire new land to be able to create capacity, is how I always understood it.
I must not have been paying attention. Probably did.
Go ahead, Councillor Elliott.
So on that line item, in terms of thinking about expanding, I wonder if we can look at things that we could co-locate with a landfill to make it more environmentally friendly. So I know we're doing gas capture, but heat capture might provide heat for greenhouses. So I think if we're talking about land, we should be looking at new innovations about what people are co-locating next to landfills to be able to use what they're producing.
And that might be an OCP level of direction as well.
It could be an OCP level, but it would be a shame to sort of just contemplate land use for garbage when I think some communities are starting to look at what they should be putting near their landfills. And it might also help us in our discussions with the crowd.
Is that a hand or is that a half hand?
No, that's a hand.
Okay. It's like, yeah.
Well, just, and I know this is really not the topic for today, but my recollections with yours, Mayor Heinzman, because I know in my first term, as I mentioned, initially staff came to us with this rather large plan, and we throttled it back for a number of different reasons, and one of them was the Squamish Nation view of it. And so it was always sort of there, but it was never the first choice. The other reason it was throttled back and sort of looked at in smaller increments was the possibility or the hope that other technology would come along that would help us deal with solid waste as opposed to just putting it in the ground. And so that to me is still something that we should always be looking at, whether there are on any given day other things, other alternatives to just dumping it in that particular site. And so any study that kind of looks at expansion, from my mind at least, should consider, is that the best way to deal with it as well? Is it better for us to barge it somewhere, for example? Is it better for us to a cogen facility or anything like that? Is the technology where we would want to start thinking about other ways of dealing with it? So, but it was always
zero
kind
waste
of,
is a big part of it.
absolutely, I agree. There's a whole bunch of strategies, and I wasn't trying to be restrictive, but these expansions, these horizontal expansions from my time on council have always been ones that were never our first choice. They were out of necessity to consider that. So I would just want to make sure that we are still, that's the only choice if that's the way we're going to go.
Yeah, Christine.
And I guess I would respond maybe to two questions. We have just in the last few months had two different businesses talking to us about being near the landfill and use of landfill gas. So that's sort of happening perhaps organically. Maybe we're not seeking it, no pun intended there. On the options, I think we did a pretty robust look at the options when we chose to go with vertical expansion. And I think once we are looking at going to the horizontal expansion, it's certainly good of us to do that again before we actually pull the trigger. I think we need to make sure we have the land available. We don't want that now, but making sure that we maintain the financial control as a community and control over our own landfill actually gives us a lot of advantages, and that's why we chose to go with that this year, or what council chose to keep the landfill active. But certainly when we revisit that in 3 to 7 years, depending on how we're doing on our zero waste program, and we're starting to look at detailed design of horizontal, then we should have that conversation again.
Excellent, thank you. I was going to take just a short break at some point, so just let me know when an intuitive moment in the program is to have that.
Now can be good, because
Have we completed this section then? Any more questions on any of the special projects? Anybody? Don't see any. Yep, Ken?
Just on to the landfill thing. And I agree with all the comments about looking into the future and blah, blah, blah. If we have companies contemplating setting up to capture gases, when we look at expanding it, that's when you need to go for the large parcel. I mean, sometimes you need an excuse to go, well, we have one company, so we need 1 acre, but you go, well, we may have, and go for the 20 acres. We need some industrial land, so.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Sounds good. Thank you. We are back in our Committee of the Whole Budget Workshop. This is our first one, November 14th, and pass it over to Scott.
Thank you. So we just wanted to quickly circle back with Chris giving us extra information on the landfill vertical expansion, that in the capital plan and on the labor matrix there's 1 FTE missing because he's got a full-time temporary person taking care of that project. So we just wanted to make sure that council was aware of that. And that project, that person is with the district for a year and started in October.
Yeah, hold on a sec. Councilor Elliott and Councilor Reese.
But that, the fees to pay that contract are being capitalized, right? So they're not affecting utility rates.
That's correct. They're included in the capital project. We just administratively didn't have it reflecting as an FTT, like an FTT count into our things. We just want to make sure we're really transparent and clear with council that that position is.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Reese?
Oh, same question, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Well, that's why we're here today. So let's review like the proposed increase for water and sewer fees. So like the good news is that we don't have to increase the sewer fees for this year, and that with the exceptional growth that Squamish is experiencing, we know that the master plan, the water master plan is suggesting a 4% increase every year to have to keep a healthy level of reserve. But from when we can foresee, 2% this year for the water would keep us like at a healthy reserve level. So that would mean $8.32 increase by household for over water and sewer. And I thought we could just, before having a discussion on the fees or the increase or not, we could just review like the reserves quickly and see like the levels that we're at. Water are currently at the end of December 31st, 2016, we're at 1.3 million. They're steadily increasing by $500,000 every year. And that's why we think that a 2% increase for this year would be, for 2018 would be good. So we're on track to achieve like the $3.5 million recommendation in reserve. Like mentioned earlier by Christine, the sewer reserve is pretty healthy. There's lots of projects this year, so it's getting a little lower in 2017, but we're making good contribution in 2018 and 2019. We're forecasting to exceed 4 million.
Yeah, it does.
So, do you have any questions on the reserves? Or?
Yeah, what is the goal? Is there,
You're afraid you'd ask that. We're going to talk to engineering more this week, but with the water master plan suggested that we needed to be at 3.5 million by 2031 to be healthy and sustainable over the time frame. Sewer, I think it's fair to assume, would be relatively similar, but
by 2021?
by 2031, I believe it was. Chris, does that ring a bell?
And that takes into account, our projected growth and
That's
the
what,
extent of the system. And,
yeah. And then so,
yeah, keep
Well,
going.
just on that point, I mean, this shows that 2019 will be at 2.9 million. So we're going to get there 10 years ahead of time, or 11 or 12 years ahead of time. Is it necessary to ramp it up at that rate, or is it
so
at that point then do we sort of taper off the contributions?
So with both, we're a little bit challenged, frankly, with any of this, because there's not really a good asset management system currently that is properly forecasting the extent of our replacement over time. And so probably we have peaks and valleys where we need reserves. That has not, and those will need to be smoothed until we get our proper asset management systems in and we can properly predict the ups and downs. It's difficult for us to give you a definitive answer. So the water master plans looked at it from a holistic, based on today, based on sort of set targets for growth, etc. That we should probably be trying to target 3.5 million. And they were giving us, because water wasn't always looking healthy, we're trying to deal with it through borrowing and some of the other things. And we've also seen a little bit of a sort of a smoothing with the capital expenditure. For a while there, we were going fairly heavily at water and not so much at sewer. So I guess the short answer is I'll feel more comfortable when we're at 3.5, and then we'll stop borrowing, because remember we're borrowing 500,000 right now for replacement. And at that point, you'll stop seeing the 500,000 going into reserves, and we'll probably slow down a bit. So over the next 2 years, I believe, in this capital plan, we're weaning back off borrowing. So I think it's safe to go to 3.5 now, especially in regards to our growth. I think sewer probably should be at the same level for now. We'll assume the same level while we're awaiting the sewer master plans to be completed, and then we'll retarget that and review that again. And as you can see with sewer, we've decided, we are ramping up too fast. Let's give the ratepayer a break. We'll just go off the growth numbers to sustain it. With sewer, even when I did my own projections for the SODC, the oceanfront, I also predicted that we were going to need to continue to ramp up water over the next few years, anywhere to 2 to 3%. That included growth projections at that time. So that's why I'm a little leery to slow down water too much, and I'm not at least reflecting inflation.
Is that helpful, Doug?
Yeah, and thank you. And so if I could just follow up on that. So if we get 3.5 for water sitting in a bank account, I guess then the question is, when do we draw on it and how do we replace it? Because it's money we've taxed for, so you want to get the benefit of it. And I can understand having reserves for bad days and so forth. So then it's the asset management plan that will inform that, because really what we're doing then is we're taking out the dips, the spikes, if you like, to get sort of a constant. So instead of putting 500,000 in, we might drop that down to 200,000 a year, and that way we keep on building it up, but we have money then to use it instead of borrowing for some capital improvement. But that plan we haven't quite got to yet.
Well, what we do is we take all of the master plans, and periodically we take it back and we do kind of a mock-up of a long-range financial plan. The most recent one done was for the oceanfront development projections. And at that point, we kind of look at that steady replacement cost If you look at the capital expenditures here, you'll see that it's quite high in 2018, and then all of a sudden it drifts off, and by 2022, it's really drifting down. I don't think that accurately reflects our true capital expenditure in 2022, with all due respect to everybody right now. I think that that's too low. So our projections right now are going to make the reserves look healthier than they likely will be by the end of this 5-year plan, because I think the capital expenditures will be higher than we're able to predict today in terms of, we asked the departments to give us very specific capital projects that they know of today into the capital plan, but I think it's very safe to assume that generally we will need more than $2 million by 2022 per year in capital expenditure, rehab, replacement, and things. So I'm cautious about reducing and not at least reflecting inflation costs in our projections for fees. With sewer, we think that there's enough buildup. We're comfortable enough that we're probably already at our targets, that we're saying, okay, you know what, fair enough, we'll ride it for a few years. I'm not as comfortable as water. And maybe engineering would like to speak to it. Perhaps they have different opinions on that, but my gut is that we at least keep a 1 to 2% in water right now.
I was just looking to see if Chris wanted to add to that.
I would agree that we at least need to keep up with inflation in water. We always feel tight. We feel pretty good on sewer, and we always feel pretty tight on water. And so, and just speaking to the overall asset management plan, and we've touched on that a couple of times this morning, but the idea is to smooth out. We have a lot of our original asbestos cement infrastructure is nearing end of life, and so we have this annual program to inspect and replace, and but it's all kind of coming to the end at a similar point in time. So making sure we have that reserve, so we smooth out the replacement of that.
In the 2011 asset management plan, there are actually spikes in, I can't remember which years, but it goes from about $3 million a year up to $10 million all in 1 year. And it does that again, probably cycles in at about that year 8 or year 9, like another 8 or 9 years, it spikes again. So what we'll try and do is smooth that. And to your question about withdrawals, and yes, we're constantly tapping in and contributing back to these reserves, and we use all operating surplus right now. So if we set a fee at 2%, we use all that operating surplus and we channel it right back into capital reserves so that it can smooth that line over. So if all of a sudden in year 10 we need to replace, multiple asbestos pipes that I think were 8 to 9 year at 2011 they figured was gonna, does that sound right? Sorry, we really need data back now.
Yeah, sorry.
But it was going to spike again, and we were going to have a very big replacement group. And so one of the reasons we kept saying, okay, that's okay, just keep stockpiling in sewers, we knew we were going to have to address that over a very short period of time. So.
And maybe it's worth explaining is that spikes in this is normal because you'll put a whole system in, and it'll have a lifespan of 40, 50 years, and then you got to replace the system, so it'll have a spike. So I just wanted to, it's hard to smooth it over, and that's why we build up the reserves so we can, because we know we're going to have spikes in our
and we try not to overbuild, like obviously we have our annual contributions based on just our book value, which is way low. We've done that exercise a couple times in the summer. We think that probably needs to be at the roughly $2 million per year that we need to contribute either to reserve or capital expenditures direct every single year to try and maintain a steady state or to do the assets. That doesn't include any of the deferred maintenance. So that was just to replace the current assets based on their projected historical life. And that does not take into account all the deferment and all the things, all the times when we, before we started ramping up utilities and dealing with that and building a reserve there. So I feel fairly confident that sewer is comfortable, not as confident with water is.
Okay, Doug, I have just Chris wanting to weigh in one last
Sure,
bit,
yeah.
and then I'll go back.
Just to follow up on your comment, I think communities that saw a sudden explosion in growth back in the 50s and 60s are seeing we're getting to the lifespan, and that's when the highway went in and we saw a huge expansion, and that's when all the AC piping went in, and we're just getting to the sort of projected lifetime of the piping that went in then. So it's a bit unique to us.
So that's why we have this spike in these past couple years and these 2 years, because we have a whole bunch of 40, 50-year-old pipe that's coming to its end of it.
So really water, as far as capital expenditure, water is driven by three things. One is the water meter installation that we've chosen to do ICI and multifamily. Two is areas of town that aren't seeing enough flow for optimal fire flow protection. And then the third is a sort of looming end of life of the original 1958 infrastructure.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, and I remember when we started this program, my first term on council, and at that time it was explained as about a 20-year program. But we're funding that significantly out of fees, out of revenue. And it's a longer discussion, and I don't propose to have it here, but I guess what I'm looking for is just some idea of when we would actually use reserves as opposed to going to fees or to borrowing to get the benefit of that money. I mean, if it just sits there and never does anything, maybe it's you wonder why you have it, except for some catastrophe. And if that's all it is, then we would identify that. So it's a longer discussion, I appreciate that, and I guess it would be, sort of to identify what is a spike and how much of a spike you might take out of reserves versus borrowing, and then build it up after, in the next 5 years after, or something like that.
So fees
Just
is
the policy around that.
Fees are a little misleading in our utilities because we take fees and reserve as almost interchangeable because we're balancing that fund to our contribution or draw from capital. So every year we're actually either tapping in or drawing from reserve is the balancing number. So unlike in our general fund where property taxation is our balancing number, with the utilities our balancing number is actually, are we going to contribute or draw from capital reserve this year? Because we have enough fees to deal with our year-over-year operating, what we don't have is to deal with the capital spiking of rehab and replacement. So we automatically assume, if you looked at water, I think, the year before last, we actually took a fairly good draw out of the water. That's why it's back down to 1.3 million. We actually chunked into it. One of the reasons I allowed borrowing to come back to water is I was concerned that it was sitting at 1.3 level, and I wanted to start moving it back. So I've allowed 500,000 to stream back to something that is rehab because I want to stabilize and steady that reserve. I prefer, if you're concerned about that 2%, I prefer we actually stop borrowing that 500,000 for a rehab project because that would get us further along to our financial policies.
And I'm not concerned about that. I'm just more concerned about when we make the decision to use the reserves versus some other source of funding. So it's kind of, I believe in reserves, don't misunderstand me, but I just don't believe in dead money. And you tax for this money, you want the taxpayer to get a benefit for it at some point. And sometimes it's a rainy day fund, but other times it's that you're going to level out a spike so you don't have to tax a lot more that 1 year. So that kind of, I guess that kind of policy, or just like our long-term financial plan, more or less, a similar kind of application around these reserves. So it's a bigger discussion. It wasn't.
Yeah, no, it's a valuable discussion too. So.
And I think we are accomplishing what you're asking us to do.
Yeah.
We literally are balancing this fund going to and from the capital reserve. So we are, in fact, there's very few things right now that we borrow for in either one of these utilities. And currently the only thing we're borrowing for in water, beyond past projects that are still finishing themselves off, is that $500,000 contribution to a rehab that really should be coming from reserve, but that would drop us down, back to $1 million. And again, I'm just a little bit uncomfortable with the reserve starting to get that low again.
Would you say our reserve approach is conservative or?
Right now, it's in a growing state. I think sewer has grown. I think that's why you're seeing us not setting fees for that. We haven't seen enough activity on the sewer reserve to warrant continuing to increase fees. With water, I think we're all, both myself and the capital manager for that area, are still highly cautious based on what we've seen coming out of master plans, the last long-range plans. We would still prefer to see us build that reserve.
Right.
Okay, so based on that discussion on reserves, are we comfortable with the proposed 2% increase to water fees and no increase to the sewer fees?
So far.
So far.
So far.
So hypothetically, if we determined that we would just do 1% in the water, where would that put us along our how far would it set us back in terms of our reserve goals and/or?
I think you
Just trying to, trying to understand the amplitude of that decision.
Yeah.
1% like brings in approximately like between $40,000 and $45,000 in fees.
So it wouldn't have a significant
Yeah.
impact overall if you'd like to go to one instead.
Okay.
We assume costs in the plan at 2 for inflation.
Well, I'm curious to see what proposed other tax hikes we have, and if we're not having other tax hikes, I could see this going to 5%. Why don't we want to build up our reserve? We just talked about how much we want to build them up. But if we've got a property tax problem hike, then I'm okay at 1%, but, so that's why I say so far.
Yeah, and just, can you go back to the previous slide?
But water is not, like every year we talk about water taxes and it's like the price of a cup of coffee a day. I mean, we need to build up the reserve, so I want a double coffee. I mean, I'm not worried about this one, it's the other ones I'm worried about.
So I just wanted to point out that it's a 1% overall, so the cost per household is only $8.32. When we say annually, when we say a percentage, doesn't always reflect the same actual amount of money because it's different numbers obviously.
And this doesn't reflect growth in fees as well. That's one of the reasons.
Right.
We're relying on growth quite a bit to fund the reserves this year because we are
Exactly.
seeing some growth.
Yeah. Karen?
I'm comfortable with this proposal, but I feel like the shoe's about to drop with solid waste. It's not
This is about to drop with what?
with the solid waste utility.
That was
Yeah.
the Chicken Little thing that I
Yeah,
did.
like,
Yeah.
this looks pretty good. Yeah, what does solid waste look like?
We're getting there.
Okay, well, let's move on.
Well, maybe we can come back to this. So solid waste. So what's really helping, so we're proposing between 2.5 and 2.7% increase. And it's like a different increase for each tote just because I've rounded the numbers, so it's like easier. Really what helped at not increasing those fees too much is that $355,000 in reduction for collection fees. So that has put solid waste in a better position not to increase the fees too much this year. And it's as well keeping in mind the next 5 years, like to smooth it out as well, like over the next 5 years. So we're not going to see like 2.5 this year and like come back and 10 and like 5% in the future. Like what I can collect from previous year information is that there's been like a very significant increase last year. So this would be like the proposed increase for the tote. For the landfill tipping fees, there is not really any increase except for the 3 line highlighted in yellow, which in the note in the model where those increases were discussed last year, that these fees would be increased this year by $5. So when we've decided to not increase the fees, just so like the citizens would like continue in using the landfill instead of like dumping like everywhere in town.
Just stay there for a moment. So, the mixed waste, I think council was pretty clear where we'd like to make sure that, I think we're happy increasing that one. We want to discourage that. The clean wood, I'm a little concerned about, and maybe it's not as simple in my brain as, but I'm a little concerned about increasing that one and squeezing the gap between dirty wood and clean wood. I'd rather keep a clearer gap between those two to really encourage the extra effort that might take to do clean wood. So I'd almost rather see, and it might not equate to the same amount of money in the end, but I'd rather see an increase in dirty wood and keep clean wood lower. I'm looking for counsel on that. Chris?
Just a quick comment. I hear what you're saying, and we had a little bit of an internal debate here this morning on what the history was of why that planned increase was there. we're certainly open to discussion on whether that's a good idea. Just a clarification on clean wood versus dirty wood. So if you have a bunch of different things mixed in with your wood, then that's not dirty wood, that's mixed waste. So dirty wood is like painted wood and wood, yeah, it's not easy to clean it. You know, I think that's a common misconception. You take the dirty wood and you clean it up and you turn it into clean wood and then recycle it. I think we do separate them out because we have different end uses of the dirty wood and the clean wood, and we do want to encourage that separation of the two because we can do more higher uses of the clean wood. But I don't think it's necessarily practical to think that people are going to take the dirty wood and turn it into clean wood in order to save whatever the delta is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I saw a hand over here. It was Peter and then Ted. Ted.
How come we're being so nice to the commercial waste guys and construction waste? I mean, construction waste, most of the time, it's dirty wood. You know, someone demolishes a building, and then they go out and they go, I mean, I can go to landfill and go, oh, I demolished a shed and dump it, or I can say it's dirty wood. And so I'm saving $200 by fibbing.
Maybe you can explain the difference between mixed waste and construction waste and commercial.
So, yeah, if you just demolish a building, and we've had recent discussions with various contractors just in the last few weeks on this. Just because you demolish a building and then you bring it to us, if you don't do any separation, it is mixed waste, and they are charged the mixed waste rate, which is uncomfortable to them sometimes because it is difficult to separate it out. So don't think of construction waste as anything that is involved in construction, just gets that rate. That's things like the pink insulation and siding and other things that aren't recyclable. If they do have recyclables mixed in, they do get the mixed waste rate.
Is that helpful, Ted?
Well, I hopefully they do.
And
that's a
we
tough
do
call.
check. We do follow the trucks.
But I mean,
And-
even
and-
so, why would the construction waste be so cheap? I mean, are we giving business a break in that, or, you know, they get to write that off in their taxes as opposed to the guy bringing out, I mean, commercial waste. What's the difference between commercial waste and residential waste? Is $200.
It's the same rate.
Mixed waste and commercial.
So there's a bit more of a question in there.
Well, I just.
I saw Dora sort of contemplating an answer.
Sure, so I can help with the question of commercial versus residential. So the residential is the waste that we collect from residents as part of the TOTES system, and it's taken to the landfill. Commercial is waste that's collected from, let's say, a multifamily that's serviced by Carney's, but not through us, or other businesses that don't have anything to do with us other than it goes to our landfill. That's commercial.
And so it's the same type of waste, it's just different streams.
That's right.
And Ted had a question about construction waste and why is it so low? And you talked about, is it compressibility? Is it how much volume it takes up? Or why would it be so much different than mixed waste?
Well, I think philosophically, I'm just, maybe Dora can kick me if I've got this entirely wrong. But you know, if you look what we have here, we have all the things that are waste that we feel should be going into landfill. There's no other place for it to go. All have the same rate. We've broken them out because they come from different places, and it gives us the ability to look at that and have this conversation. But we're basically saying, if you've got waste and you can't recycle it, bring it to us, we'll put it in the ground for $150 a ton. If all the other items are really recyclables or other things that are going elsewhere other than into landfill. And if you can't be bothered to mix it, and you've got things that shouldn't be going into landfill, then we're going to penalize you, and that's the mixed waste. So that's really the only two categories we really have philosophically.
Follow up, Ted?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do know occasionally when a dump truck goes in, the employee follows it up to make sure when they dump, it doesn't have occasionally that happens. I mean, I have a dump truck, I dump most of the time because I separate before I go. It just seems like quite a construction waste.
Well, I think we.
Commercial waste 150, residential waste 320.
Our fees are set up to make sure we are diverting it, whatever can be to other useful streams, and we're only trying to landfill what is absolutely necessary to landfill. And that's why there's a discrepancy.
And to clarify, we have photos taken of every load that goes, all the commercial loads, not the residential from the totes, but everything else are photos in our catalog, and we reference them frequently when we have disputes or whatever. We just send them the photo and say, this is why you're getting the mixed waste rate.
Peter?
Just a question. I know we were looking for compliance from some of the grocery stores in town about what they were putting into the landfill. And there was a few stalls in that, but I'm just wondering how we are with that right now. Are we approaching 100% compliance from them?
I'm not sure the specific incidents that you're referencing. If we're talking about like putting organics,
Yeah,
sort of
organics,
thing in,
exactly.
then, okay, great. Then we adopted the new solid waste bylaw in September, which gave a one-year grace period, and working with grocery stores and all other businesses in town to look specifically at what they're doing and to force them to do the three-stream separation. We have been delayed in getting that, getting the outreach going, getting the outreach contract going, and that's simply because we had a manpower problem where somebody left and we've now replaced it last Tuesday. And so we have the outreach starting now. They're scheduling the kickoff for that.
I do know for a fact that one of the prime offenders is coming online now, and where how the rest work.
Great, good to hear.
Doug?
Yeah, thanks. And I'm okay with this because if I recall the previous conversations correctly, I think there was two things that I recall that were sort of applied to these fees. And one was we wanted to encourage people to separate. And the second thing was, and so that's why the mixed waste where there's been no effort is obviously a higher number. And the second was to not encourage people to go and just take stuff and dump it in the woods somewhere. And so if you apply that kind of lens to these things, I don't think that puts us particularly offside. So I'm happy with that. And I get the clean wood, dirty wood thing. I mean, that was something I noticed. Why would we sort of encourage dirty wood and penalize clean wood with just that little item there? But it's not quite like that. I take your point in that. So I'm content with this.
Am I correct in assuming that clean wood has many more recyclable opportunities than dirty wood?
Yes.
More than likely, dirty wood is going to go in our landfill. Clean wood can be chipped and used for other things.
Dirty wood does not go in the landfill.
Where does it go?
Usually it gets
Burned.
burned.
It goes to, it goes, we shouldn't say where it goes, because through the contract, our contractor finds a home for it, and that home can change. But often it goes to Port Mellon, it goes in their cogen facility.
So it's a commodity.
Yeah.
It can be sold.
Yeah.
I'm still just trying to grapple in my head, is it, would I rather see an increase in dirty wood versus an increase in clean wood?
We brought up the point of businesses and restaurants with compost. What do places like, the big grocery stores with their big, huge compactor compost, where does that go? Is that composted?
So we, as of September, require require them to do something with it. We don't tell them what. So they will hire a commercial company to take the compost away and do with it what they will. Generally, often in town, that's Kearney's, and most of it's going to Sea to Sky Soils just south of Pemberton, just like our residential waste does, or residential organics rather.
And invasive plants, I never realized we charge for invasive plants. thought that was a free time.
Yeah, we will, sorry, through the mayor. We will be back in council probably in early January to discuss that fee and the strategy there. We've run into problems with generously misunderstanding, perhaps abuse, on the free deposit of invasives where loads come in with a few leaves of ivy sprinkled on the top. So we, so we've really had to clamp down.
Never occurred to me to do something like that. Seriously.
There are a few devious folks around. Individuals can still put the invasives in the smaller yard waste bins. Hoping I'm getting this all right. It's been a little while since we
Are
discussed
you
this.
coming back with a report on this?
Well, we are coming back with a report.
Yeah, so
and there
let's
will
not
be-
get too off topic,
Okay,
but
thank
I
you.
appreciate that, because it would have never occurred to me to purposefully taint something just so you wouldn't have to, never mind, okay. All right, anybody else? Amazing, yeah.
Well, just on this clean wood, dirty wood thing, I mean, yeah, I think we have to remember that it's not, it is what it is. It's not what you make it, because something's been painted, it's going to be dirty, and you can't make it clean practically. I mean, you can try to scrape all the paint off it, I guess, but so it's not like one could become the other. I mean, clean could become dirty, I suppose, but dirty can't become clean, not practically. Going by Mr. Whit's argument, so that's why, you know, penalizing one versus the other doesn't necessarily work. They're two different things. And you're not going to encourage people to make one into the other.
No, I'm just trying to, in my brain, determine where I see the value proposition, if it's increasing dirty versus increasing clean.
And
Is it both equal amount of volume?
as I said earlier, we were struggling with this a little bit ourselves this morning. We're happy to go back and have a look at this and look at what the financial impact really would be of making the change. As you just pointed out, the volumes may not be that this is worth
It's more the
sending.
gap I'm worried about more than the actual amount. I mean, maybe just 250 on each. Anyway, it's not worth too much, but I'd almost rather see it on the dirty, just a bizarre principle in my head that doesn't necessarily make any rational sense.
In every other context, dirty is bad.
Exactly. You call it dirty, it's about to be bad. Well, maybe it's good, I don't know. That's another topic altogether. Apologies. All right, let's keep going. So everyone's fine with leaving the dirty and the clean the way it is? Okay.
And those increases were just from notes from last year.
Okay.
So yeah, so those are the fees. Yeah, it's just like review the impacts. I've just layered on, it's the same slide as we presented earlier with water and sewer reserves. I've just layered on the solid waste reserve, which we're like really able to build increase the reserve this year from that decrease in budget for the disposal. The $355,000 decrease in the budget, so that help us diverting money into the reserve fund for the solid waste.
Council, this is one of those areas where solid waste, I mean, we may need to do some sober reflection on in terms of whether it goes to capital reserve or accumulated surplus, just because of the nature of solid waste is probably going to be fairly heavily borrowed, and we're going to have more debt service than capital expenditure coming out of the reserve. So I need to take that away and think on it a little bit. But in terms of the overall, it's you know, working capital either way, we need to decide which reserve it drops into.
Yeah,
So this 355,000 that reduces, in effect, reduces the budget ask this year because people weren't recycling as much, so we didn't have the recycling costs. If we were more successful next year, would that put us in the hole? Or do we still have a cushion in there for increasing?
So right now
I'm getting nods, so
yeah.
I'm
So
not sure the public picks up the nods.
when you look at the The reconciliation for solid waste, it looks like we're contributing to reserve every year right now. So obviously, if 355 swung back the other way, that would change, and we would not be contributing to reserve essentially. So it depends on how much, but if you, sorry, the reserve one is probably the best one after I need to do that.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Just because you can see the reserve going up ever so slightly every year. So basically 400,000 between 2017 and 2018, another 100,000 in 2019. There is some contribution going. So you can see how quickly the balance could tip if diversion went up significantly, and at the same time all the debt costs on that $6 million landfill expansion project, we're going to start tipping the scales again pretty quickly and heading back into a problem with solid waste. So it is a delicate dance right now. We're trying to forecast without all of the long-range details yet, but it is a pretty delicate balance.
So that would be one of those moments when we might use reserves to get us through
Well,
the year.
that's why I'm thinking I'd rather put it to accumulated surplus than to capital, where we are actually able to smooth the rate impact. So that's one of the things I'm kind of sitting here going, no, it's showing dropping to capital, but it probably would be better to drop it to accumulated surplus.
So just in terms of schedule, my understanding is lunch at noon, is that right? Or is it 12:30? Do we know? Do you think noon? Should be noon. Okay. We're on track?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, like after the discussion on reserve, I've just put back the fees again for solid waste. It seems that we're all okay with the proposed increase for 2018.
I'm just going to go to Chris quickly.
Just a quick note, I did pull up the tonnage on the clean wood and dirty wood.
What?
If you wanted to just keep clean wood where it was, it wouldn't likely have a material impact on the budget one way or another.
And would you suggest increasing dirty wood or?
We could balance the two. We actually take in a lot more dirty wood than we do clean wood. So we could do it as you like.
I would actually like to increase dirty wood and keep clean wood the same.
Yeah, a little bit.
And we wouldn't have to increase dirty wood as much, would we?
No.
Everyone okay with that? Just the idea of keeping the clean low, I like the visual and.
It's unfortunate, sorry, it's maybe unfortunate in the wording, that maybe there's a different word than dirty wood. You know, clean wood is very specifically lumber and stumps, I believe, and there's a very small subset. A lot of the wood that comes in is not clean. So yeah, what we don't want to do, of course, is then encourage that not clean wood to be out at the end of a Forest Service.
Yeah, we don't
So
want
that's
it-
the balance we always.
So maybe if council's okay, keep clean wood the same, and then whatever you think you need to pull up dirty wood to just help balance that out, it might only be $1 or $2.
Or we can examine that.
Everyone okay with that?
So clean wood staying at the 2017 level.
All right, we've given that too much attention. Sorry about that. Okay, moving onward.
Any thoughts, questions?
Anything else? It feels like, just a quick comment, it feels like every year we're just getting a little bit better. Like we took a long-term approach to building up, to be in a healthy financial situation in our utilities. And I know we, 2 terms ago, took quite a bold step because they were hurting and we had not been paying attention, and there was about 5 years of real pain for the utility payer, and that proactiveness is paying off today in the fact we're actually becoming quite stable in those reserves, and we'll hopefully see, particularly in sewer and lesser extent water, and even a lesser, but that sort of evening out and that financial security of ironing out the peaks and valleys.
Yeah, would you mind going back to the slide that showed the different proposed increases for solid waste, the tote fees, the different?
This one? No, that's for the
Yeah, that's
collection,
right.
collection fees.
Oh, there it is, okay.
Yeah, it's at the top.
Well, actually, what I was trying to do is just figure out, just the medium tote, take that number, what the total is between that and the water and sewer. So the water and sewer, we were talking about going up, what was $8?
8, so that's a little bit over $15.
So for a medium tote, it would be a total of about a $15 increase in utility fees.
No.
For the year.
Just so you get an idea.
Yeah, I was kind of just get a sense of.
And it would be a $12 for a small tote, $13
And
for a
then
small tote.
23 for,
For a large
no,
tote.
10, sorry, 10, 18 for the large.
Just a reminder, that's over a 1-year period,
Yeah.
so
Okay,
less than $2 a month
for all
for a
utilities.
household.
Well, that,
Oh, way less than $2.
That's what I'm saying, it's less than a
$1
$2
for
in
a small
dollar.
tote and $1.50 for a large tote.
But if you combined all the utility fees that we're proposing here right now, it would be less than $2 per household per month.
to comment on that, I mean, it's just about the rate of inflation.
Maybe a little less.
That's not.
It's actually a little less right now.
A little less right now.
Excellent. I've been on council for 12 years, and the sophistication level of how we strategically go about determining our budgets and prioritizing our infrastructure needs is leaps and bounds ahead of what it was 12 years ago. I think we've matured quite a bit as an organization. And I think a lot of that goes to how competent and excellent our staff is. So thank you.
I would agree. From a budget coordination perspective, we're very pleased with the submissions and the information we get from the departments. It's first rate. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
It's a lot less painful discussion.
We haven't got the general fund yet, but
We're taking what we can.
yeah, that's right. Have a win.
The good news first.
All right, Karen.
So just for you, something that Councillor Pryor said earlier about being okay with these fees depending on what we do with general taxation. It's just that we're going to do first year readings on these in December, and we won't know the other tax. Just
That's a good point.
so you won't know. We have to make a decision on these so that we can set the rates for the year prior to deciding on.
Well,
Property tax.
this, if anything, I would be inclined to increase this to add to our bank account, depending on what the other, you know, like we're all talking, it's so minor of an increase that if we're gonna have a 22% increase on our property taxes, I don't want to see any.
Okay, so don't get everyone excited. We're not going to have 22%.
Like Karen's point.
Yeah.
Karen's point.
That's fair.
We are not gonna know what the other. I was
Councillor
more,
Pryor advocating.
I was more thinking to add to this, not take away from this.
And it is an interesting debate because we have funds that need to fund themselves. But we also have taxpayers, not everyone pays utilities, but most people do, that get, doesn't matter, it goes to these 5 funds, from our point of view, it's still out of their bank account, their one bank account. So obviously that's the balance that we're trying to come up with. We will have a first blush at the general fund prior to adopting this, will we not?
We would like 3 readings prior to you seeing the general fund, so that's not ideal. And I think you know, there's considerable work to come. We're from a management team side, we're working really hard to bring you something viable on the other side. But definitely council's going to need to weigh in, and because that includes compromise, a lot of
Okay,
compromise.
so following up on that, is it just out of efficiency and expediency that we want to get 3 readings, or is there an actual real reason?
There are some different philosophies on setting fees, and it can go either way. I'm not going to say that it's definitive one way or the other, but generally you're not supposed to set fees retroactively. So we try to get them in before January 1st.
Yeah. So, but it would be good to have at least a general understanding where the general fund is prior to adopting this. I mean, or at least the ballpark. Is it from X you know, currently it's anticipated to be X, I don't wanna say a number, else that'll be deadline. And then we go, okay, we're in a ballpark, we can work with that, we think we can get down to something that's acceptable or not. Like, I just feel like we need to have a bit of a blush on that before, and I'll go to Karen after. Did you want to?
I'd love Karen to go first, I'm thinking about this one.
Karen,
The thing is that the general fund has things like special projects in it and more discretionary spending. And there's no way that our utility accounts could, they're two different sides of the business. I mean, these are funds that we're funding responsibly for the long term, and there's no way they can compensate for the decisions we need to make on the general fund. We're just gonna have to make tough decisions on the general fund. But even if you raise rates 5%, we're still gonna have the same conversation about the general fund on utilities. So I think that it's important to think of them distinctly, and that the two don't really interplay in my mind. This is about responsibly funding our infrastructure. And the general fund is really about a lot of, in addition to what we have to provide, some of the nice to haves, and that's where the discretionary decision-making comes in for council about whether we want to spend that money this year or not. But I really don't see it touching the utilities, so I'm comfortable doing readings prior to seeing the general fund, because it's not going to influence my decision. I think this is a responsible way to go to make sure we're funding those utilities in a healthy way without penalizing the ratepayer, overtaxing them for something we don't need to do right now.
so maybe I'll just try to put a fine point. Do any councillors think that we need to have an understanding of the general fund before we approve first three readings of the emails? Councillor Pryor had expressed concern, did you want to?
Well, and you know, just to Karen's point there, I mean, we do have asbestos pipes all over the place that we're slowly changing. And if there was more money in this account, we might do more. And, you know, if we're coming out, and I'm okay, you know, if we could say at the end of the day, we can add to this, then fine. I mean, and I don't mind, I can just easily just say, yeah, okay, I'm okay with this. But I'm just saying, if we're not nailing everybody with the tax increase this year, why don't we build these up? We have staff saying she would like to see us build these up. Instead of charging everybody $8 a year more, why not charge them $18 a year more and build up our fund? That's all. But
Because it's so low this year, most of them. So when are we going to see a first blush of the first draft?
Thank you. You will see us come out on the December 11th and December 12th at 3 readings. If that is too concerning for council, we could certainly amend a third and you know, one of the fees bylaws or one or all of the fees bylaws if you want to do that, because you won't be adopting that until the 9th.
So when are we seeing the draft of the general fund budget?
Of the week,
On the 11th?
Week before December 11th will be sent.
Okay, the week before, so I didn't hear that. Okay.
Thanks. To Councillor Pryor's point, I am also, like, it's great to see whether it's high or low, but I don't really understand because we haven't gotten our draft plans back of what we're replacing, and I don't really understand the rate of replacement or like the extent of replacement or how bad our infrastructure is doing. I know that my personal experience is I dug brand new infrastructure and put it into a wooden sewer pipe. So is this low? I think this is really low. If we actually wanted to replace infrastructure and be healthy with our infrastructure, I'm not sure, without seeing our general plans and we're doing like consultations and updating our plans, but we don't have our plans in front of us to know whether, these are just numbers to me. This is not looking at whether we're actually in a healthy place for replacement of infrastructure. We're following our plans, but are those plans adequate? How much are we actually, how much leakage do we have? How much, like, are we on top of things? I'm not getting a clear picture by just looking at budget numbers. And without having plans in front of me that I can compare numbers to asset management, it just is like, is 2% high, low? I have no idea. Are we replacing things? Are they breaking faster because we're at the end of our infrastructure life? And do we have to move faster?
So we have a water master plan, brand new.
Yeah.
We have a sewer master plan, very very soon. So we have a lot of some of the detail that's helping form some of this, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And we have a stormwater master, drainage master plan also come up.
So, yeah, I think those are the three big ones. So the water master plan is very recent. We are comfortable with it. We have based these numbers off of that water master plan.
Not so.
And we feel like we're keeping up with what we need to do with the water. And recently, of course, this year has been a banner year in water because of the grants. So we're a little ahead of the game in that respect. Water is a bit tight, and so great to have a small increase. Sewer, we're a little less scientific right now on the sewer because the sewer master plan is about to come to council. However, the sewage utility is also the one that has the higher reserves and is in a healthier state. Obviously, we have had a chance to read the early drafts and everything in the sewer master plan, and have seen some real savings recently. And we're doing a lot more trenchless repairs instead of the sewage pipes. We're having our public works folks do some of the lift station upgrades at considerable savings over tendering them out. So
And when
we
will
feel
the sewer master plan
comfortable.
come into council?
Before I make this decision,
I believe it's this year.
so that's where I'm not comfortable.
So
Go ahead. Sorry.
we feel comfortable that from what we've seen, we have enough money in this and in the annual line items, and I guess I don't know what else to say other than we have that comfortable that we can keep up.
And
with
drainage and just drainage and stormwater is not a utility, it's done in the general fund. So we'll be dealing with that in the general fund.
Yeah, there is an argument for making that a utility at some point in the future, but
Yeah,
today it's
I know, and-
yeah.
So with densification of downtown, I mean, the infrastructure that's in downtown is totally, we've replaced one main sewer pipe and a lift station across Victoria. But I just think about all the density applications for downtown, and is that, like, we're adequately replacing everything for mass amounts of densification?
Yes, through.
Thank you. If you feel comfortable with that, that's what I want.
That's what Chris is saying, is they're feeling comfortable with it. They're not feeling comfortable with water.
I'm not feeling comfortable with wind sewer pipes.
Doug?
Thank you. So I couldn't imagine them going any lower, regardless of what our operating budget comes to. And so the question would be whether we would tax more for utilities. Because we wanted to, for example, accelerate the sewer pipe replacement program. We thought that there was some advantage to that based on the study coming out. But I think I would be more content with just going with these numbers today because they're based on information we know today, and we'd have to go back into these plans and kind of re-engineer these plans to in my mind, to justify a higher number. We have, if it does come out that we wanted to accelerate the sewer pipe replacement program for any reason, whether there was opportunities or grant monies or there was just all of a sudden a pressing need that we don't anticipate today, then that's what we have reserves for. So we could do it, because this is a 5-year plan, but the reality is we review it every year. And so all we're covering off is 2018 with reserves. If we wanted to go 150% instead of 100% of what you proposed this year, we have that flexibility. So I don't think we necessarily have to go back. I think, from my mind, I could take those numbers and I could vote on those numbers today. Because we do have the ability to be nimble, if you like, if we see the need with these other utilities. I think the water has been going on since my first term in council, my first year in council actually, on a 20-year program at about $1 million a year, if I recall correctly. So it's kind of just on the same path it's always been on, and there's a priorities set by other studies, so it's based on science, and so I don't think that one's going to have to be kind of reviewed. But the sewer might be a bit of an unknown quantity at this moment.
So we're going to get general fund on the 11th, and then we're going to get first 3 readings of the utility bylaws for council consideration on the 12th.
So So the first 3 readings of the bylaws are slated to come to you on December 5th.
Oh,
For these
December 5th.
utilities. And then they would be adopted on the 19th, I believe is
Yeah.
the tentative schedule right now.
Okay.
So 3 readings before you meet with general fund, we have 2 days on the general fund, and then it would be adopted on the 19th. Just to reiterate, I know it's hard to explain to council every nuance that both the engineering team and the finance have looked at. We feel comfortable bringing you these numbers. We do believe sewer, everything in our forecasts are showing that sewer will continue to contribute to reserves over this next phase, as you see it planned $4 million. We don't know everything today. We're not going to profess that we do, but we feel that it would be not really fair to our public either to tax them on something we don't know either. So I think that we're pretty comfortable with this. We've come through with what we think is reasonable, that still serves our needs. We have had significant growth in the current year, of about 500 units of growth, which is significant for water and sewer, and that's one of the reasons too. It's not that we aren't growing revenues. We are, but this is the fee increase. So we actually, I believe in talking to Mr. Rolston, they wanted about 5% per year in water to climb to make everything work. Our growth is exceeding that right now, and that's why we're able to go at 2% instead of 3% or 4% that was predicted previously to you. So we're riding that growth just for a moment, because hallelujah, we finally get to. Often the costs of development precede, and they have been, but now we're starting to see a bit of a swing, and we'd like to just ride that out this year and see how it's going.
So even if we do want to ramp up sewer, depending on what comes back in the draft master plan, we have the reserves to do so if we need to, and that's the beauty of having a bit of a healthy reserve. So I don't know if that addresses Councillor Schill's.
You would have room to add more projects to utilities this year. The other thing we have to weigh though is our capacity, our human capacity to do all those projects as well, and we constantly weighing that as well.
Yeah. Okay, so just an update, lunch is 1 o'clock.
Thanks. Yeah, and Councillor Rice said it well, that we do have reserves if we want extra projects, but then we're digging into reserves. And, you know, which
is why we have
which is why we have them, but which is also we've been saving those reserves for a rainy day, or like for anything that breaks down. It's like having those reserves is critical for and the sewer plant, and you know, our sticky, smelly sewer plant that needs renewal. And I also think about, you know, future growth as well. We have a lot of residential units coming on, and we're growing into different areas. We also have to plan for that growth and that renewal in 50 years when it comes as well, so we're not left.
Part of the master, that's part of the program.
That's a part, it is a part of the program.
To our master plan.
But I think about, you know, we wouldn't make any general budget decisions by people saying, hey, you know, we've got that plan and we're comfortable with it. We'd like to see the plans, and I feel the same way about sewer and water as the general plan. I generally like to see the plans and our expected growth, because the public.
And they're coming, when are they coming?
As long as they're coming before the end of the readings, I'm comfortable.
Well, they're not coming before this year's readings,
So I
but
thought
we
that-
have enough reserve. If we want to ramp something up, we can. What staff is saying, the reserve is healthy.
You're comfortable digging
So if
into
we can get
reserve
this
for that.
master plan, let's say in January, whenever it's coming, it may say, here's some on-deck projects. We have the latitude within the fund to be reactive to those if we so choose.
Yes, and I would say that we do have the water master plan. It is public, has been presented. The liquid waste management plan as well, which is what is driving the wastewater treatment plant, which is a large part of the capital projects, is also public and has been presented. It's just the sewer master plan, which we don't see any surprises having reviewed it. And to Christine's point, I think if we decided we needed to accelerate somewhat the sewer linear infrastructure, that we really don't have the staff capacity to do so next year anyway. I think we're hitting the ceiling on that as well. So we'll be working on it in 2019.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Just to clarify one thing, Ms. Matthews said, so the revenue from growth, we're talking now the DCCs?
No, we're actually talking about the growth in units in our community. So we
Or
have
not
a
just sewer fees?
That's right, so
Oh, I'm
the now built and occupied units that are now contributing to our tax base and our utility base is significant for water and sewer. Obviously with solid waste, there's less impact because we have fewer single-family homes and not all multifamily have garbage and sewer, so we're not necessarily seeing as much growth in collection units, but certainly water and sewer we're seeing.
But just to follow, but we're also collecting DCCs.
We are, correct, so
And
any
that
of this
doesn't appear in
growth.
here?
In the capital projects, you'll see that we are,
Funding, yeah.
that's right, we are funding, so you don't
It's not part of the
see,
revenue, yeah.
generally you won't see the revenue coming in and going to the reserve. You see it as we pull it out of the reserve and use it.
And that's a separate reserve, the DCCs?
It is correct, yes.
Excellent. All right, so where are we?
Just if we're to
So
get
I
your
think
authorization.
I'm hearing a general consensus that bring back the bylaws on the 3 utilities for the, as
December 3rd.
presented.
Great, thank you.
Do you want a motion to that effect?
That would be probably helpful, just
Okay,
to make
then
sure.
move that staff prepare bylaws as per the report on these 3 utilities. Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor Elliott. Yes?
Do you need to do your change on the dirty
Yes.
wood
Yeah.
Yes,
in part of that motion?
Yeah. So we'll add to that motion to reflect a change, keep clean wood measured by 2017 and increase dirty wood by whatever fee, the amount that staff determined is correct. I don't want to prejudge that because it might not be $5, might be $1 because it's one more dirty
Maintain
wood.
the same revenue.
Maintain the same revenue, so, yeah. That was a really long motion, but you get,
maybe we could have similar revenue instead of same in that.
yeah,
motion.
similar, yeah, just whatever that number is. Okay, that's the motion. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. What's next?
Anything else?
Thank you. No,
We're done.
that's it for budget for today.
Yes.
So instead of wrapping this meeting up, because we're early now, not supposed to be done till 1:30, you could amend your agenda and add a motion to close,
Okay.
and then do your closing
Okay,
right now.
we could do that. So, do we have to have a motion to amend, or can I just entertain a motion
You
to
can
close?
just entertain a motion.
Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Cryer. All those in favor?
You have to say the reason.
For section, what's it say in the? I don't have my
Section
computer.
90, subsection 1A.
Section 90, subsection 1A, labor, essentially. Moved by Councillor Pryor, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. All those in favor?